No witnesses, no proof, just rumors strong enough to kill. In ancient Rome, gossip could drag women into court and keep them there. Vestal virgins were buried alive after public pressure flipped verdicts overnight. Today, I'll show you what Roman judges actually did to accused women, and how suspicion mattered more than truth. Roman trials didn't happen behind closed doors. If you were accused, especially as a woman, you stood in front of a crowd. Strangers could stop and watch. Some came just for that. In 18 BCE, Emperor Augustus passed a law that made adultery a public crime. Before that, it was handled privately, within families. But now, if a married woman slept with anyone other than her husband, it went to a jury of 50 men. These weren't secret panels. They met in forums, open spaces, often packed with spectators. The woman on trial faced exile if found guilty. She could lose her money, her rights, and her future. The law allowed the state to take part of her dowry and personal savings. Even worse, she'd be branded with infamia, which meant she lost legal credibility and couldn't remarry properly. You'd think only a husband or father could accuse her, but if they refused, any Roman citizen could step in and press charges. That included political rivals or people chasing attention. And if the husband forgave her, he could be charged with pimping, accused of letting it happen on purpose. The court claimed it was about restoring moral order, but Roman historians like Cassius Dio admitted that senators used cases like this to score points with the public. These trials weren't just legal, they were political tools. And the woman in the middle? She was a symbol more than a person. She stood there surrounded by men who already assumed the worst. Inside a Roman courtroom, a woman wasn't just judged by what she said. She was judged by how she looked. Her body, her voice, her clothes, everything became part of the case. Most Roman court officials were men. The magistrates, lawyers, jurors, scribes, and even the audience were almost always male. So when a woman stood in front of them, it already felt unusual. Roman culture expected respectable women to stay out of public life, especially law and politics. Just showing up made her seem suspicious, and what she wore mattered. A simple thing like a veil slipping or a dress that shimmered could be read as a sign of bad character. Roman writers believed that clothing showed morality. If her appearance felt too bold, too fashionable, or too confident, they called it evidence. It wasn't just about how she dressed, it was how she moved. If she cried too much or stood too still, people judged it. If she spoke clearly, she might seem unwomanly. If she hesitated, they called it guilt. Even religious women weren't protected. Vestal virgins, the priestesses sworn to purity, could be accused based on how they acted. One, named Postumia, was nearly convicted in 420 BCE just for being too playful and dressing well. She was acquitted, but the high priest still ordered her to dress more modestly in the future. Writers like Juvenal joked about this stuff, turning real fear into comedy for men to laugh at. But for the woman on trial, it wasn't funny. It was dangerous. When a Roman woman went to trial, people expected evidence, documents, witnesses, something concrete. But in reality, gossip did most of the damage. The Roman system was built around fama, or public reputation. Neighbors, servants, even ex-friends could say what they thought about a woman's behavior, and that alone could shape the case. People described her guests, her clothes, when her shutters were closed, and who walked in late at night. That web of rumor became its own version of truth. And there was a legal path for it. If her husband or father didn't press charges, any citizen could. That made it easy for people with bad motives, political rivals, bitter exes, or social climbers to use rumors to start legal action. Look at what happened in 114 BCE with the Vestal virgins. 3 were accused of breaking their vow of chastity. The first court actually acquitted 2 of them, but public outrage followed. So the state reopened the case, and a second judge convicted them. The women were buried alive. The shift wasn't based on new facts, it was pressure from the crowd. Sometimes all it took was posture. One Vestal, Postumia, got dragged into court just because she joked too much and wore nice clothes. There was no act, just a feeling that she didn't seem pure enough. And under Augustus's moral laws, that mattered. The state believed that a woman's personal conduct affected the health of the empire. So a rumor about her love life could turn into a threat against Rome itself. By the time a woman opened her mouth to speak, the courtroom already believed the story written about her. If you're into this kind of brutal history, give us hype for this video right now. Hit subscribe and drop a like so this series reaches every history explorer out there. The next twist is seconds away, and you'll want to see how deep this goes. You'd think the worst part ended with rumors, but in some Roman trials they pushed even further, demanding her body prove something she couldn't explain. This happened most clearly with the Vestal virgins, Rome's most sacred priestesses. They had to stay celibate for 30 years. If someone accused them of sex, it wasn't just a personal crime, it counted as treason. Why? Because the Vestals were seen as part of Rome's survival. If one broke her vow, people believed the gods might punish the whole city. To test the accusation, officials ordered physical examinations. That meant male priests and advisors brought in midwives and doctors to check for signs of pregnancy or lost virginity. These were real procedures, done while Roman leaders waited for the results. The woman didn't have much say in it. In Rome, fathers and husbands controlled the bodies of women in their households. If they agreed to it, the exam would happen. If she protested, it didn't matter. This wasn't just about religion. Roman medical texts show that internal exams, manual checks, and tools like specula were already used, mostly on enslaved women or patients without much status. When a woman was accused of sexual misconduct, those same tools crossed into court. None of this required actual evidence of a crime. The focus was on suspicion. Once the court decided her body might hold the answer, it stopped being hers. She became an object, something to study, test, and talk about, while her fear and pain became part of the process. And the goal wasn't true. It was to make doubt visible on her skin. In Roman courts, a woman didn't just get judged for what she did. She got judged for who she seemed to be. Her looks, her charm, her presence in a room could all count as signs of guilt. Adultery laws hit women hard. A married man could sleep with slaves or prostitutes and walk away clean. A married woman, if she had even one lover, faced exile, loss of property, and social destruction. The system didn't punish cheating. It punished female desire. Religion backed this idea. Rome had temples to Pudicitia, the goddess of modesty, and Venus Verticordia, the turner of hearts. These weren't just symbols. They were public reminders that female sexuality needed to be controlled to protect the state. So when something went wrong in Rome, bad harvest, civil unrest, a scandal, people often blamed corrupt women. Senators paid for new shrines, gave speeches, and pushed laws to clamp down on female behavior. The message was simple. Women were tempting men away from their duties. Even elite women weren't spared. Augustus's own daughter, Julia the Elder, was exiled in 2 BCE for alleged affairs. Historians called her tainted by luxury and lust. They didn't just list her partners, they blamed her for corrupting Rome itself. That attitude shaped every trial. If a powerful man said, "She seduced me," people believed it. Her style, voice, or smile could be flipped into a reason to convict, and ancient writers, poets, lawmakers, satirists, had already taught the public that a tempting woman must be guilty of something. So no matter what she said, the way she existed became part of the case. In Roman law, a woman's legal identity was tied to the men in her life. That included her father, husband, or male guardian. These weren't just figures of support. They were often the ones who decided her fate in court. The system was built on patria potestas, the absolute power of the male head of the household. He could arrange her marriage, control her finances, and make legal decisions for her. So when she was accused of adultery, the court looked straight to him, and the law forced him to act. Under Augustus's rules, if a husband caught his wife with another man, he had to divorce and press charges within a set period. If he didn't, he risked being charged himself with lenocinium, basically being accused of profiting from her infidelity. Fathers had even more control. In certain situations, Roman law gave a father the legal right to kill his daughter and her lover if he caught them in the act, in his own house, under strict timing. Husbands didn't have that same freedom. The message was clear. Fathers had the final say over family shame. That put families in brutal positions. Fathers who acted destroyed family ties. Fathers who stayed silent faced social backlash for appearing weak. Some even risked their own legal consequences. And the woman? She was caught in the middle. Her life depended on whether the men around her chose loyalty, fear, pride, or self-protection. Historians say entire families were torn apart over whether to defend her or cut her loose. When a Roman woman was on trial, things didn't always end with a verdict. Sometimes they gave her a way out, but it meant losing control of her story. Judges and magistrates had power to shape outcomes. They could choose how strict to be, how fast to move, or what punishment to push for. That gave them room to negotiate quietly behind the scenes, especially in messy or high-profile cases. Confession changed everything. If the woman admitted guilt, even without solid proof, it became one of the strongest forms of legal evidence. That made things easier for the court, her accuser, and sometimes even her family. But it didn't help her much. Confessing usually meant exile, property loss, and infamia. Her legal status was ruined either way. But people around her often pushed for it. Families might say, "Take the deal now, protect the children, avoid more scandal." Some even promised better treatment or private exile in return for cooperation. There were other strategies. Some women tried to register as prostitutes, which legally moved them outside the rules of the adultery law. It was a legal loophole that could help avoid harsher charges. But the cost was brutal: public shame and a permanent mark on her status. In every version, the trade-off was the same: lose your name to save your body, or stand firm and risk everything. And even when she agreed, the system still labeled her the problem, never the people who pressured her into it. You'd think her voice might finally help her, but in Roman trials, what she said often got used to break her down further. Women could appear in court, but they weren't allowed to act as advocates or trained legal speakers. That meant most had to rely on a male relative or a hired orator to speak for them. So even when a woman explained herself clearly, her actual words were filtered, rephrased, or even ignored by the man speaking on her behalf. And once her story hit the courtroom floor, it was fair game. Roman orators were trained to spin everything, especially if they could attack a woman's tone, mood, or honesty. A perfect example is Cicero's famous speech, Pro Callio, where he defended a man accused partly by his former lover, Clodia. Cicero barely addressed the evidence. Instead, he mocked Clodia's character, called her reckless, and compared her to a Medea of the Palatine, a woman driven by lust and revenge. This strategy worked because Roman law was never equal. Under Augustus's adultery laws, a woman couldn't accuse her husband of cheating, but he or her father could accuse her. Her claims carried less legal weight from the start. And if she froze, stumbled, or tried to protect someone, jurists said those reactions could be signs of lying. Nervous pauses, contradictions, Even a shaky voice could be called proof. In the end, her story was retold by others, doubted on sight, and held against her. You'd think torture stayed out of a courtroom, but in Rome, pain was part of the process, especially for people close to the accused. Roman law allowed something called testimony under torture, mostly used on slaves. If a woman was on trial for adultery and her household slaves might have seen or heard something, the court could legally torture them to get answers. Not just threats, actual physical torture, including stretching on the rack, beatings, or burning. Even if they loved her, the pain usually won. Roman jurist Ulpian admitted this straight up. Tortured people often lie just to stop the suffering. But that didn't stop judges from using those confessions as evidence. Over time, this didn't only apply to slaves. By the 2nd century CE, free lower-class citizens could also be tortured if they weren't part of Rome's elite. The state had a label for them, humiliores, the less honorable. Their bodies were seen as less protected, so courts used pain when they thought it would help the case. For the woman on trial, this meant her maids, servants, or childhood nurse could be taken from her home, tortured in secret, and made to speak, true or not. She had no control over what they said under pressure, and no way to stop it once it started. Even if she wasn't physically touched, the screams came back to haunt her testimony. Judges trusted pain more than anything she said out loud. The result? Her case stood on forced words, made in fear by people who just wanted the pain to stop. Once the trial ended, you'd think the damage was done. But for her, the punishment kept going, even after the courtroom emptied. If she was convicted under Augustus's adultery law, the sentence was usually relegatio, a form of exile. It wasn't prison, but it wasn't freedom. She was sent away from Rome, banned from certain cities, stripped of most property, and branded with infamia. That label followed her for life. She couldn't remarry properly, write a legal will, or testify in court again. In 2 BCE, Augustus exiled his own daughter, Julia the Elder, to the island of Pandataria. The place was tiny, barely more than a rock in the sea. She lived there under constant watch. Some of her supposed lovers were executed, others were banished, and she never fully returned to public life. Her daughter, Julia the Younger, was later exiled too, again for alleged adultery and suspected political plotting. She died in exile. That's 2 generations of elite women cast out under the same system. But what about the men who accused them? Or the judges who accepted weak evidence? Most faced no consequences. In fact, accusers could gain rewards, public praise, career boosts, and even political office. Judges who relied on gossip or torture were rarely questioned afterward. Roman law gets praised as a model of order, but that order worked best for elite men, especially the ones running the trials. The system didn't just fail women, it actively used them to prove morality, power, and control. She left the court ruined. They left with their careers intact. And when you look closer, you realize this wasn't just ancient history. Versions of this still echo today. You've just seen what ancient Rome did to the women it